Welcome to another Miami Dolphins group therapy session here on Locked on Dolphins. Week 3 in the books for Miami. We're talking about it.
You are Locked on Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked on Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked on Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked on Dolphins, co-host of Locked on NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked on Network. Today's episode of Locked on Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 to use in bonus bets across the app. Welcome to another Miami Dolphins fan group therapy session off the heels of a 31-21 loss to the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about some things that we saw that were different in the game in week 3, which were promising things that were different, but also make you want to pull your hair out because you would have loved to have seen those kinds of elements into the game and the offense that you played at the beginning of the season. We're going to talk about Tyreek Hill. We got to talk about Tua Tagovailoa in this game. We got to talk about the defense and what they did in the back half. We got to talk about Zach Sealer. There's a lot to get into. And then there's some reporting that was out before the game in regards to the hot seat with Mike McDaniel. And then what's next, right? Because we're getting ready to go into the weekend and watch the rest of the teams play. And there will be the last team to play in week 4. And Peter Schrager had some interesting comments in that regard as far as where things currently stand. I would start with this. Well, this is not a problems versus solutions conversation. This is just kind of debriefing after the fact. If you guys didn't catch it last night, everything kind of came together pretty quickly for this, but we did do the first of what we are going to do in addition to my 5 shows a week already here on the Locked On Network. We are having a Locked On Dolphins squad show with Grease, who's been the host of the postcast, myself, and former Dolphins player / longtime NFL coach, defensive line coach, Jeff Zuniga. The 3 of us were on last night for an hour live after the game, and we are doing that every Wednesday and every post game throughout the course of the season. So we're excited to add more layers to your coverage here on the feed. It's on the YouTube channel. It'll go in your podcast feed. And then, of course, you still get me with your daily programming as regularly scheduled. So that was kind of the first drop on thoughts that I had in this game. But coming into the game, I was of the opinion that if the message and the tone of the locker room with the players-only meeting was it's about the players, it's not about the coaches because the NFL is going to evaluate you and it doesn't care about the coaches, that was a really bad omen. And that if the Dolphins were going to lose the game on Thursday and it was going to be in ugly fashion, then the writing's on the wall and Steve Ross should step in and do what needs to be done. I will give the Dolphins team, roster, players, and the coaching staff this. This was the most inspired version of the Dolphins that I have seen in 3 games. And that's when you add it to the 2-6 start and getting to 8-8. I know you played softer teams on the schedule, and softer teams are coming on the schedule now because you've got the Jets and Panthers the next 2 weeks, right? And a chance to get back to 500 against the Chargers if you win tonight. Way too early for any of that. The response and willingness to play last night. And at times it felt like, you offensively, kind of a training wheels type offense, right? As far as not looking to work the ball down the field, the completions behind the line of scrimmage were such a high volume of them early were behind the line of scrimmage, but the time to throw was up. I think it really underscores some of the limitations that a team like Buffalo forces you to play with within the limitations of your personnel. And we could talk about that on all fronts and what answers you do and don't have in that regard. But I appreciated seeing a team that came out inspired to play football, a defense that buckled down as the game unfolded and made some changes as the game unfolded. They made some adjustments. You had guys making some plays. They're very porous in the run defense early. That kind of stabilized. The coverage was really loose early. It kind of stabilized. And then your team captain, Zach Sealer, has the unfortunate roughing the punter on a stop, would have been your third consecutive forced punt. And you can't make those mistakes against the Buffalo Bills. That team doesn't need any extra help. Especially you as a team that's undermanned. You're trying to punch up here. You can't give extra possessions that start on the plus 36. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and that's exactly what it was. And for Zach in particular, you can't help but notice and observe after the week 1 game, Mike makes the statement at the podium about Zach for abandoning a rush lane, and that stood out to me and the character in which it happened. This is the kind of error that's so amplified that I think it warrants the microscope and it warrants the conversation about what's going on here. And Mike said that the intent was to try to hurry the process of the punt, to which I would simply ask, why anyway? Like, it is what it is. You're punting into a short field. You have the potential for them to pin you deep, so maybe you want to force a bad kick in that regard. There's no reason, and it's pressing, and I think that explains a lot with what you felt like you've seen with Zach in general. Is, he's had some matchups against guys that have a lot of power in their hands, right? And Quentin Nelson in week 1, he had some matchups there. He had some matchups against Michael Onwenu, who sets hard edges, is really wide-edged guy, really powerful hands, really strong grip. You could say some of those are matchup disadvantages, and the rest of the group hasn't blossomed in the way that you think they will down the road, and I think that's totally fair. But then you have a play like this, and that, to me, feels like a guy who's pressing to make a play, right? And heavy as the crown, right? And you get a big contract extension. You're the only guy that got big money from this football team this past year, and you had to wait all off season to get it. And it's a really unfortunate circumstance. I think Zach long-term will be fine, but we just got to continue to log reps. And I know that's the sentiment, and I saw this in the comments from the squad show last night. You got a quarterback you're paying a ton of money to. You got a roster with a coach on the hot seat. Talking about things to build on is not really the sentiment that you're looking for. And I get it. I totally do. But there are teams like the Rams, after they won the Super Bowl and then had the regression year and they got rid of all the talent, they had to go back to square one. And that's what this season now, for me, especially as this path for this team has declared itself through 3 weeks, that's what you're looking for, is the context of what that growth looks like week over week. And that doesn't have to mean if the growth is good, you just pretend the problems don't exist, right? It's whenever it becomes apparent that the situation is untenable, whether that's in week 4 if you lose to the Jets and the team quits, whether that's week 9 if you get boat raced in the matchups against Baltimore and Buffalo on your home field, whatever that is, if that's at the end of the season, I think you can still have those conversations while still looking for growth. And that, for me, is now how we continue to observe this season. And put that Rams season in context. They had a bunch of injuries and they went 5-12. And then they offloaded a bunch of talent and they started 3-6 that year. And then they won all but one of their last games after their week 10 bye. And their one loss was an overtime loss to Baltimore. Now, they ended up coming all the way back and making the playoffs out of that. They start 1-2. They won their week 1 game and then lost 2 games to San Francisco and Cincinnati. This was in 2023. And that was Stafford on big money. You had Aaron Donald, so you had some expensive older players, and you start 3-6, right? And that's not to say, hey, the Dolphins are going to be fine. We're not going to pretend that they don't have problems. But this is a world that teams exist in. And the Tua piece of the conversation is another thing altogether. Now, we're going to get into that next because, I try to be mad, but I try to be fair and I try to be objective. And when I want to be upset, I want to make sure I'm upset at the right things. There are some things to be upset about with your quarterback play in week 3. We're going to touch on that next. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP. Who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players deliver when it matters most. I want to break down today's Dolphins choice, who delivered in a big way. And for me, it's Ollie Gordon, the rookie running back, who gave you some thunder to go with your lightning. And I think when you talk about things to build upon, you got a guy who's rumbling through A-gaps and breaking yards. He's got 50 rushing yards on the season. He's only got 12 rush attempts, and he's got 46 yards after contact. He is delivering yardage on his own, creating plays, converting third and shorts. That was a big issue for Miami. Ollie Gordon was there in a big way against Buffalo on Thursday night, and I'd like to see more of him. Just like Ollie delivered for the Dolphins in a big way, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order, you stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms to apply. Promo period is through November 18th. So let's talk Tua Tagovailoa. 22 of 34 for 146 yards. Was not sacked in this game, but faced pressure. Threw 2 touchdowns. Had a deciding interception. And I said this on the squad show last night with Z and Grease. But each one of the 3 games has felt different as far as the limitations with the offense. The first one was you were flying blind, and I did not feel like Tua saw the field very well to execute his reads and make decisions on where to go with the football. I thought that was a part of the issue in week 1 where you're running basic concepts and a guy's available and your eyes start on that side and you turn it down. That's uncharacteristic for Tua because he's made fast decisions with the ball. And coming into this game, his average time to throw was up over 2.5 seconds. And the year before it was 2.25, right? And you talk about the unsustainability of that and how they've tried to put some different layers into the offense to allow you to access more of the field, have more of it at your disposal. And I think you saw that as far as just, from a surface level, just the average time to throw. Well, in week 2, Tua executes the offense in a much better way. Now, you still saw the limitations. It was the outside of structure stuff where it was he gets outside the pocket and twice he runs out of bounds for a -1 or a no gain when there's an opportunity maybe to push the ball down the field, or you get that opportunity and you miss the throw. Right? And Tua gave you a little bit of that in this game. He had the outside of structure, outside to his left, hit Tyreek Hill. Tyreek made a great catch on a high ball. There was still some inconsistencies with it, but the overall theme for this game for me with Tua was how Buffalo chooses to play you and the box that it puts you in. Where, I felt Tua operated the offense much better in week 2 than week 1. And some people, everybody's frustrated, and I get it. I'm frustrated too. But then that turns into Tua is the worst quarterback in the NFL, or you can't defend Tua. And all I really said was he was a better quarterback than the way that he played in week 1. And I thought he actually executed the offense and made right reads and right decisions, regardless of, the arm strength showed up when he tried to push the ball down the field. And it showed up again this time around when you tried to push the ball down the field. But the Bills played with a soft roof, and they forced you to throw the ball underneath. And when you can't drive throws, he had, it was the Tyreek Hill on the far sideline from the far hash throw that he tried to make and completely missed it. And it was maybe a little late, maybe a little bit outside the structure of the timing of the offense. The interception in and of itself, you had an opportunity maybe to get off script there, maybe pull the ball down, get a yard, slide, take a sack, throw the ball away. But Tua said after the game, I'm watching the flat, and the flat defender runs over the top, and Waddle's hitching down. Within the timing of the play, I felt I was right. So I threw the ball. I throw the ball, and the linebacker jumps it because the linebacker sees it coming, and because your route spacing didn't force any pressure on that linebacker to flow with as the back releases from the backfield out in the flat to the same side you start your eyes. You're pulling that zone defender that way. Kurt Warner had some great feedback on this. Talk about the number 2, Tanner Connor, has to threaten the Mike linebacker and release inside. And he's running a corner route, and he just runs straight line. And I don't know if the responsibility there goes on Tanner, if it goes on the play design, but you hurt the play design. And then from Tua's perspective, there's this faith in the timing and the execution that he didn't confirm prior before he threw the ball after the snap. And it leads to an interception, and it would have been a potential game-tying situation, right? And for Tua to not be able to drive some of those throws, to not be able to attack if they're going to play you in a certain way and attack the far accesses of the field, be able to get outside a script and feel comfortable and consistent with your production in that regard, that's where the conversation shifts. And we talked about it last week after the New England game and the 2 go-ahead drive opportunities that you had that didn't come through. And what I said was I hope we get as many of those instances as possible because I want the clarity on what Tua is going to do with them. We have another bullet point, and it was unfortunate. The right guard takes an early L. Keon Smith gets benched in this game for Brunskill, who takes an early L on a short set. And you got a 6'7" defensive tackle in your face. The corner route, whether by receiver error or play design error, doesn't threaten the linebacker, so he can run right over top and jump the route. The quarterback doesn't confirm the rotation of the Mike linebacker and just trusts the space is going to be there. It's a timing-oriented throw, which in and of itself, there can be these kinds of miscommunications if your landmarks aren't the way that they're supposed to be. You're at 3 minutes and 1 second, and you choose to pass the ball trying to milk the clock anyway. It's a lot of layers all stacking on top of each other for things that have been headaches for the Dolphins for years. And for Tua in particular, the style of passer that he is, if you get a team that gives you soft space, gets you soft space, now all of a sudden you're at the plus 21. You're in the fringe of the red zone, the red area. The field naturally compresses a little bit. That spacing's a little bit tighter. That linebacker's walked on that hash because that's the passing strength with the back offset to that side. It almost would have been better if you had given some either had the back offset away, and I get that's further for his landmark, and it gives less likelihood that things are going to pull open and be open. But just the timing and spacing and orchestration, as Kurt Warner did a deep dive on, and it was really insightful as far as the timing with the footwork gets set up at the top of the drop. I got a lot of guys in a narrow funnel, to try to make a decision on where I'm supposed to go with the football. All of that for me feeds into kind of the limits that Buffalo forces you to play in. And you were hoping Tua, kind of like the Week 9 game in Buffalo last year, it would have been your second drive to tie the game in the fourth quarter. That would have played out very similarly. You were hoping you were going to get that opportunity. You were hoping you were going to play the clock right, maybe go for 2. None of it happens. But to go a full passing attack like this and take everything so compact underneath. You had a nice anticipation throw on the touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill, but you played in the box from a passing game perspective, regardless of your speed and your spacing. And that really underscores, I think, where we are walking away from this game 0-3. And it's a part of the problem. I don't think that's unfair to state. And it's, with Tua on a second contract and in year 6 and the questions about, where the consistency with the footwork and the torque on the ball is at right now versus, it's already not been, the arm strength's already not been a hallmark trait of his. I still don't think it looks like he's firing on all cylinders relative to like his own standard. And if that regression sustains across the next 14 games, well, that's a regression that I did not have on my bingo card for a guy kind of in the prime of his career, like for most aged quarterbacks. And that creates a whole other set of conversations. And I don't want to be overreactionary and jump to conclusions off of 3 games or off of this game, but kind of the book with Tua in Buffalo is the book on Tua in Buffalo, and it came up in bitch again, where they forced you to play in a box. Coaching hot seat buzz and what's next. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. The NFL season is in full swing. FanDuel is making sure you're ready with kickoff with a can't-miss offer right now. New customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to play, whether that's player props, same-game parlays, jumping in live as the action unfolds. Makes every game more exciting, and especially for you this weekend, with the Dolphins not playing on Sunday, you have your whole Sunday free. Take advantage of it. It's quick. It's easy. It's the best way to add a little bit more energy into your Sundays. So if you are ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. This episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's a local sports bar packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhoods thrive. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/locked-on-NFL to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Almost all of the buzz, and it certainly felt deliberate, all of the reports from every major media outlet that Stephen Ross doesn't want to fire Mike McDaniel. And, that can change if the team quits or if the fans stop showing up on game day and it's an empty stadium and you hit Steve Ross in his pocket. That can be how you can facilitate kind of a change in the psychology. And I thought, was Marcel Louis-Jacques had an excellent piece for ESPN. And what he talked about that really stood out to me for Mike McDaniel and the psychology of what the team is looking for, right? It really spoke to me that Marcel kind of alluded that it wasn't about making the playoffs this year. It was about the same thing that Chris Greer alluded to with winning in the right way. And that being the process versus results and wanting to see better process. Now, I still think you have to win enough games. And I don't think losing records is going to put you in a very safe space. And I certainly don't think beating up on the soft teams on your schedule and having these same issues like the ones that you had where you are playing in a box offensively against Buffalo and maybe not as consistently committed to the run game as I would have liked to have seen, but it's neither here nor there. And I think Mike called a great game. And on my list of pecking order of reasons why the Dolphins lost last night, Mike's not very high up on the list. Mike was not, I felt, a part of the root problem yesterday. But I thought it was telling that was part of Marcel's accounting in his story. Source familiar, this is courtesy of Marcel Louis-Jacques on ESPN. Source familiar with Ross's thinking told ESPN this offseason that they do not believe McDaniel and Grier's job security hinges on something as simple as playoffs or bust, and reiterated that sentiment after week one. Grier said in January that Ross hasn't issued an ultimatum to either of them. According to the aforementioned team source, Ross's status quo comment pertained more to the process than the results, although there is a limit to his patience with the team's results. Peter Schrager, in the aftermath, says, I don't think a loss to Buffalo, who's a Super Bowl contender, really changes the intensity of the scrutiny. But if the Dolphins were to lose twice in as many weeks on primetime at home against the Jets, I think maybe that's where you would start to see the needle move. So make no mistake, the playoffs are busted. If the Dolphins end up going 9-5 and finish 9-8, but they miss the playoffs, I think that's probably a scenario in which you're looking at. You'd assume that there's growth. You'd assume you probably get more stable in the running game. You'd assume the defense really makes continued leaps and bounds. And I thought they were improved from the first half to the second half last night. Not that that makes you feel any better about a loss and giving up 31 points. And I get that. But James Cook had 74 rushing yards in the first 20 minutes of the game. And Josh Allen went through you twice like it was nothing. And then you gave them a short field off the interception and you roughed the punter to give them 10 points in the fourth quarter. So I felt the defense kind of found themselves a little bit. I think that will continue to be the case. No, but I think 9-8, if they made that kind of run, I think that you would look at it and you'd say, hey, we're that outcome probably comes with a lot of player development and growth. But there would presumably be changes. And I think a piece of that, if Tua Tagovailoa doesn't find his prior form as a passer, I think you'd be very concerned. And I have my own thoughts on the Tua contract and what the best course of navigating that looks like. But that's for a different day, right? But Peter Schrager saying if you lose to the Jets, man, things probably do get a little dicey. So I think that's where we're at as far as what is next, the hot seat buzz. This becomes the critical week. And this is the same week in a number of games, week 4, that Joe Philbin was dismissed back in 2015. He came in on the hot seat, was perceived by some as a lame duck coach. The Dolphins start 1-3. Now, the Dolphins are 0-3 right now. You get the 0-4, we'll see. And we got to figure out some more about the Jets. They gave the Steelers all they could handle. They got smoked by the Bills. Is that a good sign for Miami? Miami's at home. They're wearing these new uniforms. We'll see. But I certainly wouldn't perceive anyone as being safe or having a very clear pathway to being safe other than running the table or losing 2 more games the rest of the way, which is just frankly with the schedule, it's not going to happen, right? The law of averages says you're not going to get that much hot that fast and beat teams like Buffalo and Baltimore and some of the other challenging teams on your schedule. Tampa looks like they're going to be a wagon this year. So I wouldn't dismiss any kind of outcome at this stage. And that's why I try not to be overcommittal or overreactionary, because we need more of a sample size. Speaking of more of a sample size, 3 players I would like to see more of starting in week 4 against the Jets. Ollie Gordon. Do you know Ollie Gordon is currently 5th in the NFL in EPA per rush? He's behind Rachaad White, Javonte Williams, James Cook, and Kenneth Walker are the only players from an EPA per rush standpoint. Now, Ollie only has 12 carries, but that's the point. It's not enough touches. Want to see Ollie continue to get more work. Dante Trader played less snaps last night than he played in either of the first 2 games, with Jason Marshall now going down with a hamstring. I think big nickel and base defense with Willie Gay are probably your pathways to success in that regard, in my mind. So I would like to continue to see more Dante Trader. And Mike just had his press conference this morning and is talking about how Darren Waller's going to play in week 4. He almost played in week 3. I don't really care about Darren Waller. But I would not be mad about seeing us get Greg Dulcich some opportunities at the tight end position because I'm over the Tanner Connor experiment in any way, shape, or form. And I understand that Tanner is Greg is a bit of an injury risk. He dealt with some hamstring stuff during his time in Denver on his rookie contract. And I get it. But I got a pretty good feeling based off 3 weeks of tape and more than doubling the amount of snaps that you've had as an NFL player. If you cut Tanner Connor to make space, and then you put Tanner back on the practice, like if you put him on waivers, you'd get him back on the practice squad without a lot of competition. He had another drop ball last night. I don't know where the assignment to blame goes on that corner route that was on the deciding interception in the game, but lots to debrief. And I'm going to stay process oriented as best as I can. I'm going to try to stay rooted to my interpretation of the game and the assignments and the facts and the performances as best as I can. You know, I'm a fan just like all of you are, and I'm frustrated just like all of you are. But I want to make sure I'm focusing and channeling my frustrations fairly and objectively so that I can have a clear mind on what I think needs to be done when it's time to make decisions, whether that's after week 4, whether that's after week 8, whether that's after week 17 or 18, whatever that looks like. But I'll give the Dolphins their credit, and I'll give Mike McDaniel their credit. I thought Mike called and coached as good of a game as he has all year, and probably the back half of last year, maybe going back to some of the games in 23. I thought he was not a marquee problem. I think he actually had some plays that were available that they didn't make. Your captains really let you down in some spots last night. And that's everybody's pressing, trying to make plays. And unfortunately, against a team like Buffalo, you make those mistakes, they will make you pay, and they did. The Dolphins now sit at 0-3. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. We'll be back on Monday, kind of get ourselves oriented for week 4. We'll see what the weekend brings. We'll see if there's any personnel moves, all that kind of stuff. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I am out of here. Go Fins.